Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for joining this webinar on emotional health. Our moderator today will be Andrew Green, who is the PRO of the Post Scholars Association. So I will hand it over to Andrew, and Andrew will introduce our host for tonight. Our guest speakers for tonight, that is.
Good evening and welcome, everyone. This evening, we have two esteemed commentarians who have done us proud, Dr. Charmaine Jackman and Dr. Marcia Emanuel. Dr. Jackman is a Harvard-trained licensed psychologist with over 23 years in the mental health field. He was born and raised in Barbados and attended Commonwealth 1984 to 1991. Dr. Jackman is the founder and CEO of Inner Psych, Inc., an organization on a mission to change the face of therapy and to promote wellness and healing for people of color. Inner Psych, Inc. is an award-winning organization focused on increasing access to therapy through its online Therapists of Color directory and emotional wellness programming. As a change maker, Dr. Jackman is passionate about the intersection of psychology, mental health, and diversity, equality, and equity and inclusion, and has created social impact initiatives that support community members and mental health professionals. She has used her expertise to shape how organizations respond to and support their employees during the COVID-19 and racial violence crises. Dr. Jackman is also a recipient of the 2020 American Psychological Association PLC Diversity Award, and she loves talking about mental health and is a national spokesperson for mental health and emotional wellness. She has also been featured in both print and TV media outlets locally and internationally. Welcome, Dr. Jackman. Also, we have with us Dr. Marcia Emanuel, a psychiatrist with 23 years experience as a physician. After graduating from Commonwealth in 1992, Dr. Emanuel attended the University of the West Indies, Mona, Jamaica, and completed medical training in 1997. She then completed postgraduate training in psychiatry in 2002, and also has a master's degree in forensic mental health care from the University of Birmingham in the UK. Dr. Emanuel has been the lecturer in psychiatry, UWI, and consultant psychiatrist at the QUH Hospital since 2005 to this day. She coordinates undergraduate and postgraduate training in psychiatry and runs a clinical service at the QUH. Welcome, Dr. Emanuel. As you can glean from all that I've said, in speaking of Dr. Jackman and Dr. Emanuel, they're well placed to enlighten us this evening, and we invite them to do so starting now. Dr. Jackman, you want to go first?
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Andrew, for that warm introduction. And I am going to share my screen. I just want to share a couple slides with you just to kind of center us in this conversation and make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. Please feel free to use the chat if you have questions, comments. We love you to engage with us. So please use that. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Awesome, great. So I'm going to skip ahead. So one of the things I want to ask everyone, if you can just put in the chat, how is mental health viewed in your family? So is it positive? That's like thumbs up. Is it, maybe we don't talk about it at all? Or is it viewed negatively? So if you put positive, neutral, or negative in the chat, and that will give me a sense of kind of where people are coming into this conversation. Okay, let's see this chat here, we go. Neutral, okay, so mostly neutral.
Is that way?
The one positive was sent to me privately. I'm surprised. Okay, all right, this is good. This is good. Okay, so I always like to start there, and I think when I grew up, mental health was viewed quite negatively. And despite that, have always been fascinated by the mind and human behavior, and that's what got me into this field. But in my work, I know my experience, people from the Caribbean really hold a lot of stigma around mental health and therapy. We have a lot of messages that really kind of interfere with people being able to access support and help. So some of the stigma or barriers to getting help often is like, we're strong people. We don't see that. We don't have to deal with things like that. You just got to keep it moving. Also, don't tell your business, right? You keep your business in the family. So those are some things that have gotten in the way of people kind of seeing mental health as a support, and also accessing therapy. I also know in my experience, there are not a lot of therapists, and I'm sure we have people who are both local and in the US tuning in today. There are not a lot of Black folks who are in the mental health profession. I'm not sure, Maisha, is it just the two of us from our from our school?
From our year, yeah, probably.
Yeah, definitely for a year, right? So there are not a lot of us in the field to begin with, and it is a pretty long journey. So those are some things that also get into the way, in the way of people getting help. The whole idea of mental health and psychology and psychiatry were started by white folks for white folks. And so again, a lot of the thinking and the way that I was trained, I'll speak for myself, didn't necessarily fit with the way I had to do a lot of translation to make it fit and work for the people that I serve and work with. So there are a lot of those barriers that come into play. But one of the things that I find helpful is talking about mental wellness, emotional stress, emotional health in terms of stress. And I think that's something that people can access, they can hold on to. There's not a lot of shame around it because we all experience stress in some form or fashion, right? If you're living and you're breathing, you got some kind of stress going on. So I think that's always a very easy way to enter the conversation about mental health and therapy, is to talk about stress, because that's something we can all connect to. And I think this conversation in particular, in this time in 2020, when we're dealing with COVID, quarantine, economic downturn, a lot of political stress, people are feeling the impact of stress at an even more pronounced level. And I think it's a really great way that people who have traditionally not wanted to enter conversation about emotional health, emotional wellness, can find language or find the space to enter it, because we're all dealing with some kind of stress, right? So I think for me, that's been a real positive, to be able to enter these conversations in different ways than I might not have been able to. So for me, I always ask people, so what are your signs of stress? How do you know when things are off balance for you? For me, I can tell you it's like when I don't sleep. So I feel like I have a lot of things that I need to get done. And so I power through it, and I'll stay up very late trying to get things done. So I may have just a few hours of sleep. And then that translates into being grumpy, being tired, not being focused at work. So those are some of my signs of stress. So I invite people, if you feel comfortable, to kind of note in the chat, what are some signs of stress for you? Again, we all deal with it. And part of bringing this up is because it helps us. It's a great way to look inside and see what's happening for me. Sometimes we think things come out of nowhere, but our bodies give us a lot of signs about how we're doing. And it's so important to be able to connect to what's happening in my body, and that may give you a sense of what you might be worried about or thinking about. So that's why I enter that conversation. And then if anyone's posted, Andrew, let me know if anyone has shared.
Someone is saying tummy ache.
Yes. Though, and for a lot of people, their stress plays out in their bodies, right? And it's so our minds and our bodies are very intricately connected. And it's so important to really understand that our minds are part of our bodies, our brain, or function, whatever you call it, right? They're all interconnected. And sometimes our bodies tell us before we even realize what might be going on for us. And so that's why I have this slide here, because it's really important, because when we are in a chronic state of stress, it can have a negative impact on our different bodily systems. And Maisha may go into this more as the MD. I'll have you go into that more. That was part of your talk. But starting from the head, right? So for women, sometimes for men too, like sometimes their stress plays out in hair loss. I remember when I was doing CXCs, like my hair was dropping out. And so those are sometimes signs for people that they're under stress. I talked about sleep. And then it's like the mental health function. And so you may feel anxious or feel like you can't get out of bed. You're maybe really worried and grumpy with people, or you're withdrawn, like you don't want to be around people. Some people notice that they may make it through their workday, but then they come home and they're collapsed. They're in their bed, sleeping all the time. So those are some definitely signs. Acne as well can often be another sign of stress for folks. And then in your general body systems, cardiac issues, you may notice increases in your blood pressure, heart rate. Someone mentioned stomach aches, right? So those are definitely, your gastrointestinal system can be impacted, whether you may get constipated when you're really anxious, or you might be eating, doing some emotional eating, and that could impact your digestive system as well. Or again, when we're stressed out, it can impact our work performance. We may not be able to make it to our work on time. We may be missing days, calling in sick. We may not be on point. If you're a parent, that might fall through the cracks. People have decreases in their sex drive and libido when they're feeling stress as well. So these things over time deplete our system. And also then, again, because our minds and our bodies are connected, they can also translate into mental health concerns. So I just want to give a few tips, and we'll definitely go into more of these symptoms as we talk. But again, what are some signs for mental health concerns? Changes in your mood or behavior. Noticing that you don't really want to be around people anymore. You may have fears of leaving home. I've noticed this, I've seen this a lot since the quarantine here. People have been really afraid to leave their homes. Feeling hopeless, having thoughts of death or dying. So suicide thinking, right? Thoughts of wanting to hurt or kill yourself. Those are real, people have those, and it's important for us to be able to have a conversation about that as well. Noticing increases in alcohol and drug use, sleep issues, weight gain, or being overwhelmed with your typical life demands. Sometimes having a medical illness may also make it worse. And employment, other life demands like your job, losing a job, losing a loved one. Again, with COVID, we've seen a lot of loss. Some folks have lost their job, changes in our daily routine, being home more often. Those are all signs, are all triggers that can make mental health concerns worse. So I want to definitely talk about coping, but I'll pause there for now and let Maisha jump in.
Okay. Thank you so much, Charmaine. I'm just going to share my screen as well. And I think it's a good segue what you started to talk about, because I just wanted to just make a little bit more, some more points about what you're saying. So yes, the connection between stress and anxiety. And Charmaine, what you started to talk about was a little bit about depression symptoms. But my side of the talk, I'm going to connect stress with anxiety. And only today, a patient came to me, saying that she's finally come to the realization that she cannot just will her anxiety symptoms away, because we had this long conversation over weeks about why it was necessary for her to combine, seeing the psychologist for talk therapy as well as using medication. And just to make the point, and this slide is busy, but you don't need to read it. The only point I was making by putting this up is to just show that there's a physiological response. It's acute stress on this side or chronic stress on that side. And it's not all in when people say, oh, you know, just snap out of it and get on with life. That's not, you can't snap out of all of this, right? So that when it's going on, you really need to get help. And I often talk to people about combining both seeing a psychiatrist with a psychologist, because the medication alone is not going to make everything magically better. And we know through research that combining the two things, meaning medication with talk therapy, that's the best way to get more long-term lasting effect. So as I said, you know, there are actual physiological changes that occur beginning in your brain and extending into your body, that whether it's acute stress or chronic stress, that can lead to the number of symptoms that you're talking about before. And Charmaine, you went through this just now, so I'm not going to belabor it, just to make the point that with acute stress, obviously, you know, you may have transient problems with anger and back pain and so on. But on the chronic side, these things become much more long lasting and you know, it developing into then, as you had said before, diabetes and so forth. The thing is though, having a stress response or feeling anxious is a natural, normal part of life. And if you look at the scales that measure things that are stressful, even positive things, you know, a promotion at work, building a house, being pregnant and having a baby, getting married, these things are pretty high up on your stress scale, right? The problem becomes when, as you get more stressed, your performance reaches a maximum. But you see, at this point here, when performance starts to go down, no matter how much more stressed or anxious you become, your performance is even less. Okay? And that's in this area here is when you start having longer lasting issues around anxiety and anxiety disorders. So just again, just to underscore, it is normal to have a stress response and feel anxious because it is protective. You know, if you have a deadline and you could care less because, you know, what if the boss quarrels with me, I'm not going to be bothered, then you just don't bother with the deadline. Or if you have an exam, you know, that's the purpose of stress. It makes us prepare. And so we want to be on this end of this curve. When we're on that end, then no matter how much, you know, how much tighter the deadline is or how more important the exam is, you're just not going to be performing well, right? So there's a maximum point, and then after that, it makes no sense. This just demonstrates the overlap between stress and anxiety. So on the one hand, we have your body is reacting to some kind of external cue, you know, getting the job done, some kind of external pressure that is, as I was making the point before, is quite normal. It can lead to anxiety if not kept under control. And on this side here now, you have lots of worrying that's going on for a number of months. You find that resolving the issue doesn't result in the fear and nervousness not being there. Near constant worry, you start developing panic attacks, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And you know, you may require some kind of therapy or medication by the time you get over on this side. And the point here is that there's a lot of overlap between the two things. Again, all the symptoms that we talked about just now. Right. So I get a lot of people coming to me with a panic attack. And because very often it can feel like a heart attack, people, as you can imagine, get terrified with the idea of having all of these symptoms, right? So people talk about, you know, I'm in my car in traffic, and all of a sudden, my heart is beating fast, I'm short of breath, I can't breathe. I feel as if somebody's choking, or you have a sensation of this lump in your throat, or you feel as if you can't swallow, your chest is tight. And the bit about the heart attack comes when you're having chest tight pain, and then you start getting pain radiating down the left forearm and your arm. So you're thinking, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. I'm in the middle of traffic. Nobody's going to help me. And you know, you feel as if you're dying, or you're going to lose your mind and go crazy. And what is actually happening is that you're having a panic attack. Now, a panic attack can happen in any number of circumstances, any number of mental health disorders. So a panic attack in itself does not tell you what is going on, because you can be depressed, you can have a one-off panic attack, you can have any number of anxiety disorders, you can have any type of mental health disorder. The point is, if this is happening to you, of course, your first port of call is to ensure that there aren't any medical, physiological reasons why you're having this. So for example, if you're having thyroid dysfunction, you can present in exactly this same way. So we do that first, and once we have ruled out any physical health problem, then we start thinking about any mental health problem that could be precipitated the attack. Whichever way it is, the point is, so these conditions are quite manageable, but so often because of stigma, or people just don't want people to find out that they're seeing a psychiatrist. It always amazes me the permutations people go through to not know that they're seeing a psychiatrist. So if I have to write sick leave, they don't want me to sign the form, and what am I going to do? There's only one name and signature I have. They will go to their GP and let the GP sign it, because they don't want their employer to know that they're seeing me as a psychiatrist. So there's still, and as Charmaine has mentioned earlier, there's still a lot of stigma around seeing a mental health professional. But I think that as years have passed, things are getting better and better as people become more aware. I think COVID has presented an excellent opportunity for us, in that people can really identify with feeling anxious, feeling worried, feeling depressed, being socially isolated. And so it's easy, it makes the conversation around mental health easier, I've found, because people are now much more willing to engage, because you're thinking, well, if the entire world is going through this thing, then I can surely talk about what I am experiencing. So I really think we have an excellent opportunity here to make something good out of a bad situation where COVID is concerned. Right, I just wanted to briefly show this slide just to make the point about the number of anxiety disorders that may present with symptoms of anxiety and or a panic attack. And again, this is something you will sit down with your mental health provider and work out which one of these, or if there's something else happening. The take-home point here is not so much that there are all these anxiety disorders. I think the take-home point is these conditions are very much manageable. There's no need for anybody to sit and literally suffer in silence, right? Because too many times I see that happening, and it's just completely unnecessary. You can manage conditions with talk therapy alone, because some people are very worried about medication and side effects and all of that. So you can see your psychologist, see your therapist, use talk therapy to manage. If your symptoms are so severe that they're not improving with talk therapy alone, you can add in medication. Whatever it is you come up with your mental health professional, the point is, do not sit in silence and suffer with these things when there's a lot of help available out there, and you can access the help in Barbados, right? Whether it's your private psychiatrist, or in the public system where there's a psychiatrist every week in each polyclinic, you have private psychologists. There's a lot of help, but it's about accessing it and recognizing that you can do better and perform better than you have been up to this point if you're having such severe symptoms. I'm going to stop here for this point and kind of open the floor for questions.
And Maisha, well, I just posted in the chat screening tests that were developed by this organization. Well, they're not developed by them, but they have a website which has a number of different screening tests for depression and anxiety. And those, most of them are like a 9-question survey that you answer, and that can give you a sense if you're having these experiences and you're not really sure, you want to check those are really great screening tests that you can use.
There's a comment in the chat from Beijing Queen, who indicated, hope people acknowledge stress does not merely affect females, since males refuse to accept that they're worried, and it affects them as well. Perhaps you can expand on that particular point that's being made there.
Yeah, thank you, Beijing Queen. I thought I was the only Beijing Queen, so we're gonna have to talk about the name. But yeah, you raise a great point. And, you know, women and females have been socialized to talk about their feelings for the most part. And so men, I think, really experience or traditionally, historically, have experienced a hard time talking about what's going on. And I see that in my family. My daughter is the chatty one. She's always talking up a storm. And my son is the more reserved. And so there are parts, there's some, the way we're socialized, which contributes to that. And I think the harm that causes is then one of the things that I had initially planned to share, but I didn't, was talking about suicide. So suicide is when someone takes their life. And we find that men actually die by suicide more often than females. And the reason for that is they often use more lethal methods. But it highlights that men often struggle and suffer in silence and don't have a place or outlet to talk about what's going on for them. So thank you for raising that. And we do want to make it clear and accessible for anyone who is, and that's why we talk about this stress and anxiety and depression. There are things that affect all of us, and finding a way in a language to talk about it with whoever you feel comfortable is really important.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, you know, in general, health-seeking behavior amongst men is, you know, surely lacking. You know, women go to their general practitioners much more easier than men. Only today I was laughing with my cousins because at 45 they are squirmish about getting a rectal examination. I'm like, you know, come on now, you know, do you know what women have to go through from year zero? So, you know, just to make the point that men tend to kind of shy away from seeing the doctor, and it's even worse when it comes to the psychiatrist, right? Because on top of everything else, you know, you can't be a soft man to be going to see a shrink. You know, and so we really need to change the language around what going to see a mental health professional means, so that people feel that it's fine, and it is fine, right, to talk to somebody.
We have a question from David. That is, what percentage of stress would you say is gastrointestinal related, and how much is diet a factor?
Right. So a lot of times the gastroenterologist would interact with me around exactly that. Like, this person is coming and complaining about, you know, irritable bowel. Either they're feeling nauseated, or they're having heartburn, or, you know, they're having loose stools. And, you know, sometimes a significant portion of that is stress related. So with the worry and, you know, just kind of ruminating and not coming to a logical end to the worrying thoughts, very much can present with GI symptoms. So yes, it's quite a significant proportion of people who present in this way. What was the second part of the question? Sorry.
How much is diet related?
Right. Right. So I suppose it's related from the point of view of, you know, if you are depressed and anxious and not making, you know, good choices in terms of what you're eating, then it's like you get into a loop, right? Poor choices, and you feel sicker, and you're still making worse choices, which then make you feel even more ill. So yeah, you know, when it comes to food choices and your mental state, I think they do play into each other. So the greasy things and that kind of thing just doesn't help you to feel physically or mentally well.
Is that the situation when people explain it away by saying it's comfort food?
Comfort food typically surrounds, you know, you're feeling upset or low, depressed about something, and you know, the things that would make you feel good in a short period of time, chocolate and cake and all that, you know, you're not looking for, you know, wrong provisions, not comfort food. So yeah, you get the release of that natural feel good when you eat those sweet things, right? Best to avoid those things.
So I also just put another YouTube link to a Black man who's sharing his journey with depression that I think it's really, I was listening to it over this weekend. I think really good to be a nice starting point for men who may be experiencing depression and hearing how at least one person kind of worked to navigate that journey.
Jennifer has a question. She's asking, how are you able to determine stress in children? To give the example of her son going through a period of complaining about stomach aches and a doctor indicating that it was not a physical problem.
Charmaine, you want to take that one?
I can take that one since I'm trained as a child, but I don't really see children in my practice anymore. I definitely think one of the key things in most mental health conditions is a change in behavior. So you always want to look for some change in behavior that is persistent or that lasts more than a day or so, right? So like we're looking at 2 weeks or more. So sometimes you might also see changes in behavior, like for example, when COVID first hit, my daughter started having trouble falling asleep at night or would wake up a lot during the nighttime with more kind of night terrors or nightmares. So there are ways in which children, particularly when they don't have a language to explain what's going on for them, it comes out in their behavior. So you want to be looking for changes in their behavior. So sleep patterns, like maybe they were potty trained, but now they're having more accidents at night. Changes in their eating. Maybe they're not really wanting to hang out with friends or talk to friends anymore. Seeing declines in their schoolwork or motivation. Sometimes they may say, well, I don't want to go to school today. They might be complaining about, you know, some headache or stomach ache that makes them not want to go to school. So it's really important to pay attention to that and try to notice what changes have happened for children. So have there been changes in the family structure? Someone who was typically there is not there anymore. Is there stress in the family that children aren't really children aren't necessarily included in the conversation, but they might be hearing adults talk about things that are happening, but not having anyone talk to them. They may be making up things in their head about what's going on. So I think really noticing, major changes in their behavior, talking to school, to the teacher and hearing like, how are they doing at school? Or you notice any differences at school as well. So I think, again, you're noticing, as I said, a lot of us, we kind of express our stress through our bodies. And so that's definitely a great way to pay attention to if your child is complaining of more physical complaints. And again, if it persists over time, right? So there may be something that happens that might be nervous or scared about, but if it's something that's persistent over a 2-week or more period, then that's definitely something to pay attention to.
I think one of the things that we have found with COVID generally, I think children have really struggled with the changes. As you were talking about your child, Charmaine, I was just thinking of my son who's 8. And I mean, for the month of April, I don't think he slept more than 4 hours at a time. I mean, he was waking up at 3 o'clock and he was like, what is wrong? Like he's not saying, well, I'm scared, or he would just wake up, come into my room, and then of course I can't sleep after that. And I couldn't function the next day. And so that's why it stuck with me how difficult it was for him. And it was only when school reopened that his sleeping kind of normalized, right? Mm-hmm. So whereas, the children, as you were making the point, that they can't say, well, I am scared because all these weird things are happening and I can't go to school, and why can't I be with my friends? They're telling us that by their behavior, by that change that you're talking about, right? So we as the adults, we have to have our eyes and ears open to kind of make the connection between what's going on in the world. Why is this child responding in this way?
Yeah, and growing up, talking to your parents about your feelings was not a thing. Hopefully, it's changed. But one of the things that I think is important is, again, I know in Barbados it's kind of settled down, but it's really important to explain to children what's happening in words that they can understand, so that, because they make things up, they just will make things up in their head. And so it's really important to give them a vocabulary and help explain to them what's happening, and reassure them that, they're safe, that you're doing all you can to make sure that they're protected and safe. Another thing that some clients were sharing about their own children was that children were starting not to want to go outside and play. They wanted to, a friend of mine was sharing, her son just wanted to stay in bed most of the day and didn't want to change out of pajamas, was just very comfortable kind of just spending the day in bed. And again, that was something, when she shared that with me, I was like, okay, you gotta get on that, because you don't want that leading to becoming more depressed, or, leading into depression. So it's like it was an early sign of depression. And so we talked about that and gave her some strategies about how to kind of help get him up, motivate him, building, keeping a routine going, I think was really important, so that they're not falling into this pattern that then just become vegetative and could lead to more concerns.
Yeah.
Can you expand on and address the issue greater detail relating to Black men in particular, and how they're socialized to avoid dealing with mental health problems? Perhaps that, Dr. Jackman, you want to
Sure, yeah, I'll start and Maisha can continue. So again, and I, ask Maisha, because, my practice is based in Boston. So, so I can speak from that context. So I would say in Black communities in general, like mental health, people don't really want to touch it, right? So when we look at data that's based in the US, 90% of people with a mental health condition will not get help, will not go get help. And part of that is due to, again, we talk about stigma and barriers. Part of that is like if you do decide to go to therapy or to see a therapist, more likely than not, the therapist is going to be a white person who may not understand your cultural context. People have shared with me, they've gone to therapists and people have been racist or said racist things in the therapy session. And that's part of why I started my organization, InnoPsych, which is a directory that helps people find therapists of color. So there are a lot of barriers that get in the way of people getting help, period. When we talk about how men are not socialized to talk about their feelings, and specifically, many cultures have a real machismo, right? The man is in charge of the financial responsibilities. They're not responsible for nurturing and caretaking, right? And so, we have these images of the man going out, working, coming home, getting, his physical needs met in terms of maybe being, fed his dinner, provided with dinner, and maybe not a lot of interaction with the wife or partner or with children. Men are told, you got to be strong, right? You got to man up, don't cry. So there are ways in which they were not given a language to talk about what's going on with them. If there's a problem, they either have to figure it out on their own or just suffer in silence. So those are some of the language, the messages that men and some women too, I remember as a kid, you start to cry, don't cry, so cry is seen as a weakness, right? So there are many ways in which we were not socialized or allowed to express and talk about the feelings that we're having, that are normal feelings and normal reactions to bad things that happen, right? And so if you don't develop that language, you get to be an adult, it's going to be even harder.
Yeah, I think in the context locally is very much similar to what you're saying, Charmaine, in terms of the way in which people generally, and men in particular, are expected to, put on the brave face and like suck it up and, you know, just get on with it. And there's no patience for, well, you know, today, the last few weeks I've been feeling really down and I'm not functioning and you know, I'm not sleeping and I'm having all these kind of ruminating thoughts and so on. And because of that, because the language is not about feelings, how people may present is, you know, pain. So I have tightness in my shoulders and I'm not sleeping very well and my appetite is not good. When you ask about the mood, there's nothing that says my mood is low, because you just don't think in that way, and therefore it just never occurs to you that maybe what you're describing there is an episode of depression that you're having. But because you never learned that language, you just kind of talk about physical symptoms, and you know, when you dig a bit deeper, you recognize, you know, this started when, and then you get a list of things, that and that and that and that and that, and it's just been worse in the last 2 months, but has in fact been going on for the last year or whatever it is. And the problem with that, of course, is that the longer you go untreated, then the harder it is to kind of climb out of that hole that you're in, right? Just now we were talking a lot about stress and anxiety, but what we didn't specifically say was that it is more the rule that one will go with the other, in terms of anxiety going with depression or depression start with anxiety. So when if you start off having primarily anxiety symptoms and those things go unmanaged, very, very soon the mood goes low. And the other way around, if you start off with a low mood and it's not addressed, then you worry and your ruminations set in. And again, the answer for that is a physiological one, right? The same hormones we all have in our neurotransmitters we all have in our brains that manages mood are the same neurotransmitters that manages your anxiety. So obviously one will follow the other, right? So we kind of, there's an artificial way we talk about stress and anxiety and depression, but it's all pretty much interrelated. Yeah. You know, this slide where I showed the brain and the body connected, same thing with these illnesses, right? It's just a matter of where in the spectrum you have sought help or intervened.
That's very, very true. So thank you for making that point, Maisha.
We have another
we
question.
only have like 15 minutes left, and someone asking about coping strategies. So I can share a couple slides. Definitely want to get to that. So let me share my screen again. So, so as I mentioned before, I started this website called innopsych.com, and it's primarily, or started out as a therapist of color directory. Actually, let me skip to that real quick. Is it here? Yeah. And it's US based, so it's national. So there are people in we're trying to get to every state, but you know, there are people who are across the country who are signed up in terms of therapists. And it's a free resource for anyone looking for therapy. So if you are in the US, definitely tap into that. This guy, Roger Levine, is actually Bajan. So we connected a couple of months ago. And you can search by state. So that's definitely one resource. The other resource that I talk about is, that I developed, is this this card deck called Finding Your Sweet Spot. And I really wanted to make, so there's this whole idea of mindfulness. It's really about our breath, self-compassion, and present focus. The idea is that we want to develop strategies that help us build in relaxation as part of our daily routine, that we use self-compassion in that and show grace to self. So if you make a mistake, or if you're having thoughts that you don't want to have, you just allow those thoughts to come and go without judgment. So a very non-judgmental way to kind of address and help cope with daily life. And then the other idea is present focus. So focusing in the present, not worrying too much about the past or the future, and not multitasking, right? So if you're doing something, you're doing that one thing. And I found like I cannot multitask. I mean, I think there was a time before COVID that I could probably fake it even more, but now it's like, I cannot do two things at one time. I just have to be present. So this has 10 different strategies that are built on, really wanted to connect it to my culture and the culture of Black folks. These are things that I've shown to prove. So, and there are questions and little tips that you can use. The whole idea is that people have journal prompts or activities that they can do to promote their emotional well-being. And then the other thing I want to share are these mental wellness apps. So for kids, there's this one called My Life. They have different meditation apps, mindfulness strategies. So they're like guided meditations that help you walk through a relaxation routine. My kids love doing one. There's one specifically for children. There's a whole one about sleep for kids, and there are like 10 different meditation scripts within it. And there's a character called Bulldog. There's a couple different characters, and they love doing that. And it's really cool. We do it at night, we sit down, and there's some that you can watch. So it's kind of like part of like, I think they just like, because they feel like they're watching TV. Some that are just things that you listen to. So those are really cool. And then there's some of these for adults as well. So you might have heard of like Calm or Headspace. Liberate is made particularly for people of color, Black folks. Shine as well. And there's some that are faith-based. So these are really great ways to kind of build in relaxation and breath and being present focus into your day. And my goal is always about prevention. So thinking about what are the things that I can do to practice wellness, self-care. And self-care is not just about getting your nails done and getting your hair done, right? It's really about taking care of the inside. What are you doing to feel well, to affirm yourself, to do things that bring you joy? So that's what I would say in terms of building resources for children, doing things with them that make them joyful and happy. Like, what are daily things that you can do? And that part of that might be asking them. You may not get an answer the first time, but if you keep asking, you'll get it. Yeah. So those are the main strategies. And I'll put my my links in the chat so you guys can follow through, check them out and reach out to me for sure if you have any questions about that.
I think one of the things I would usually say to people when they talk about, well, how do I just following up from what Charmaine was saying, how do I attend to all these different things? And I say, if you think of yourself as in the middle and you're sum of multiple parts, right? So if 90% of your time is spent working, then it means there are multiple other things that you are not attending to. Right? So you can't just look at, if all or most of what you do is work, then what about your family? What about your friends? What about relaxation? What about exercise? What about your hobbies? So all of those things you are leaving out because you're spending so much time just doing the one thing. So the point is, I'm not saying if you have 10 different things, it has to be 10% each. The point is you have to attend to each one. Right, and it's your role to find that balance really, so that you are some of the whole, right? So it's like when my colleague, I spent the last 3 days on call and I didn't get to go home, and I'm thinking, yeah, but your partner is at home feeling like, what is this? Or your child is probably there thinking, I miss mommy or daddy. So to me, that's nothing to be particularly proud of, because there's so many other things that you're not getting to do because you're just doing all work, or for the opposite thing, people who are always out relaxing and not doing enough, of the other things. So I'm just saying, make a point of addressing each area in your life, whether it's employee, employer, partner, parent, sister, brother, whatever it is. You really need to address all of those different areas. Yeah.
I think there are a couple more comments in the chat. I'm trying to.
Somebody's, all right, you addressed that about the child assisting a child with stress.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, basic tips for assisting a child with stress.
Mm-hmm. Even more so, we're thinking of a child, and depending on the age, like for really young kids, like when my children were younger, I would practice, there's this, if you'd use like, what do you call it? Blowing bubbles, right? So if you actually have the bubble machine, you can use that, or the bubble juice or whatever. You can use that because that's a way that helps bring breath and relaxation. Another strategy that one of my supervisors taught me was you could, if you have a real flower or pretend, right? You can breathe in a flower and breathe out. You can blow bubbles. So those are really good ways to help younger kids practice breathing and relaxation. As they're older, there are a lot of apps for kids. Or Sesame Street has, what is it? I think it's Big Feelings, Small Kids, Big Feelings, something like that. So they have a whole set of games and also content for teaching children relaxation and mindfulness. And mindfulness is really a strategy that really helps practice breathing. And it works. It requires practice, daily practice, but it really works. If you're into yoga, those are really great as well, because again, they focus on the body and connecting the body and the mind. And those are really great strategies. And there are a lot of child yoga things you can do. So I think the great thing about the internet is they have a lot of great resources that we can tap into. So just being open to those and trying new things. And there are a lot of great things that people have developed for children. And so using them, and I never let you want to do it with your child because you're helping to build that connection with you and them. But it also makes sure that you're kind of seeing what they get first. So I always say, try it out first before you expose your child to it, just to make sure it's something that is connected with your values and there's no inappropriate stuff on there. But those are really great strategies for helping children. And guess what? They work for grown-ups too. So while you're doing it with your child, you can also be benefited from it too. One of the questions that I get a lot is kind of how do you go about starting therapy or reaching out to a therapist? How do you start that conversation? And, one of the things that I'll say is like, it's my job to help you walk you through that process. Like, we're not going to leave you out there. So you just got to make the call. You just have to decide this is something that I want to do. And I tell people, don't wait till like you feel like there's a problem. That therapists, I love seeing people when things are great and they're just wanting to build on strategies or learn things that help develop them more. And then in this time of COVID, as we said, we're all experiencing stress. And so it's the right time to go check it out. And nobody's going to be like judging you because you're like, you should go too, right? Come with me, right? So, really want to promote this therapy as a resource and something that can actually help you improve and kind of live your best life. So I really want to change that message around the stigma, and it's not for us, it is for us. And we need to build things to help us heal. So we are providing a new narrative for our children and for the next generation.
Katrine is asking about addressing stress in teens, special grouping.
But teenagers, by virtue of the developmental stage that they're at, can experience a lot of stressful situations, whether it's around peer relationships or beginnings of intimate type relationships or exams and moving on. As you get into late teenagers and early adulthood, moving on to the next phase and stage in life. And so all of that can bring a lot, especially when, that is the time in your life when you're supposed to kind of be pushing back at your parents and rules and all these types of things. So a lot of things are going on around in that period of life that can bring much stress and anxiety. And I think, sometimes it's the simple things like starting the conversation, the parent being the one to say, I notice, going back to what we were talking about before, about the change in the behavior. A child who was kind of out there and happy-go-lucky, all of a sudden is more sullen and withdrawn. And you say, I noticed that you are not how I'm accustomed to seeing you, and starting that conversation. And, it may take a couple of times. You're not going to get everything out the first time, but you have to keep going at it, even when you get like a leave me alone, I don't want to talk kind of thing. You back off a little bit and then you try again a little bit later. But definitely setting up that environment that makes it okay and easy for that person, the teenager, to come to you, right? And that may mean, kind of allowing yourself to be vulnerable to the teen. You may say, I remember when I was at your age and the difficulties I had, because a lot of times teenagers look on their parents and say, oh, you know everything, you're so perfect and I'm not, and this is the way I feel, you don't understand. But if you, talk to the child and say, listen, I was once 15 or 16, I wasn't always 45, I understand where you're coming from, and I've had these similar experiences, right? I think too often, that is not encouraged enough. Let me put it to you like that. And the problem with that, of course, is that if you as a parent, you're not having that type of relationship, then the child is going to, get the information from some peer, which might not be the most accurate, or some other adult that you probably don't want them to be talking to in the first place. So the onus is on you to create that safe space where they feel they can approach you and talk to you about whatever it is that's going on. Beijing Queen is making the point, gentle prodding can show that you actually care to keep trying to relate and be there for them. And that's exactly the point. So it's not a one-off thing that you do. It's a journey you go through, and whether it takes 2 weeks or 6 months or a year, the point is you are there and you're demonstrating that you're not going to go away because they keep telling you, no, leave me alone, I don't want to talk, So it's really about creating that space for them to trust you and have that kind of relationship with you.
Very good points. I definitely add to that. And, I've seen a lot of, again, because our context is a little different, where students are either remote or hybrid. I think students have gone back to school for the most part. But I think a lot of what teenagers are dealing with is like, their high school experience or their secondary school experience isn't what they envisioned. Some of them getting ready to leave school, and just lots of like things that are not what they expected and anticipated. So there's a lot of grief and loss around what they had imagined or envisioned their life would be. So I think just being mindful of that and checking in with them as well. Teens tend to kind of, gravitate to their friends only and not really bring parents into their circle or into their thinking. But I definitely echo what Maisha is saying, is that you really want to start those conversations. And the hard thing, I think, as a parent, you got to listen without judgment. So even if you disagree, you just got to listen, because the minute that you start to jump in and say your own opinion, that more than likely will shut down that conversation. So listen, there'll be a time where you can share your values or share, something you want to talk about, but being open and kind of hearing what they have to say is going to be really important. Tapping into their music, again, finding, watching a movie together and being able to talk about that together, or listening to a song. So finding ways to connect, and sometimes just be in the same space, and you don't have to talk yet, but it is about kind of building memories and letting them see you, that you're open and wanting to understand what's going on for them, I think makes a big difference.
Can you share your thoughts on how we can build a culture of reaching out for help, particularly amongst men who don't see that as being manly?
Well, I think that very much follows on from what Charmaine was saying about from young. So obviously, I tell parents a lot, you cannot start parenting a child at 15, because at that point you've lost the battle, right? Meaning, we very much in the Caribbean, I find we are very good at telling children, no, you can't do this and don't do that, and you can't go here, and these are my rules and you have to live in my house and it's my. But the flip side to that is much more effective in terms of if you want, quote unquote, good behavior, reward works much better than say punishment, right? And reward doesn't mean you have to give them a $20 or some prize. Sometimes it's just saying, that was a good job. Or, you used your manners well for a younger child, or things like that, just verbal feedback that's positive, right? So, and you start that from young so that you have this open relationship where the child knows that there are expectations for behavior, and that, yes, mommy and daddy might be upset because I did something wrong, but we'll be able to talk it through, and yes, probably will get punished, but it's going to be okay at the end of it all. And you build that from young. So when 3, 4, 5, 6, not starting that at 15, trying to be I'm the parent and you have to listen to me kind of thing. So I think, in direct response to the question, I think it's about parents being parents from day one and building that relationship. And particularly as the person is asking about men, dads being involved in the lives of their children from early, and forming that bond, that relationship with them, so that as things become more difficult, as you get into teenage years, you have that foundation there where you already have mutual respect and understanding what each person expects of the other, and so you have something to build on when things get rough, right? But it's not going to work if you start at some late age and you're like, well, you can't talk to me now because I don't want to hear what you have to say.
But I will say though that, because if you do have a 14, 15-year-old, like, all hope isn't lost. And what you can say is like, I made a mistake. Can you mute Sharon? We can say I made some mistakes, or I'm learning some new ways to do this parenting thing. So, help me, we're going to be working together. I'm going to be trying some new things, right? So I think it's okay to acknowledge, like, I definitely made some mistakes, but I want to do better. And, you're going to have to be consistent and show, like, you're going to follow through with the things you say you want to do, and how you respond to your child, for them to start to rebuild that trust. But I want to say, like, it doesn't mean that all hope is lost. If you're 15 and you haven't done it when they're younger, right, that you still can, but it's about acknowledging and making an effort to do things differently. And again, it doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect, right? But just saying, I'm going to be trying some new things because I went to this talk and they give me some new strategies and new tips. And I'm going to be, working to help rebuild our relationship, or help build a different relationship. But I think that's important, because the end of the day, our kids need us as much as I think you said this earlier, Maisha, they may act like they don't want you in their life, right? But they do still need that guidance and that reassurance, and allows you to build that positive relationship as they get older. But just going back into, like, the men, I definitely agree with you, Maisha, is like, starting that conversation from young. But if you're a man out there and you are seeing a therapist, talk about it with your boys when you go hang out. Like, talk about it, right? So sometimes you're gonna have to be the person to model that. And I know, I think David is on the line. Like, he asked me, I invited him to come to this talk a couple months ago due to a colleague who passed away, who died by suicide. And these are things that are impacting our communities. And so if we keep it silent, right, then we don't engage a conversation, we don't make it safe to talk about these things. And talking about suicide, or talking about depression, talking about anxiety, doesn't mean the person's going to get it, right? It just creates a space that we can have conversations, we can educate, right? What are the symptoms? What do I look for if I'm feeling that? How do I know if it's me or I'm dealing with it? Or if a friend is struggling, how do I know, the friend is struggling with something, and how can I help them? So the whole point is about education and really changing the narrative, so we don't have people suffering in silence or taking their lives when there are other options that are available.
See, Chanel is making a point in the chat, saying within the school setting, I try to emphasize that the same way we go to the doctor when we don't feel well physically, it's okay to reach out to your counselor if you don't feel well emotionally. Sometimes doctors send you for more screening, so you may be sent for more mental screening. It's okay, and with help, you can feel better. As persons who know better, we have to keep pushing that conversation to change the culture. And that is exactly correct. If you normalize mental checkups the same way we normalize, physical checkups, right? Your stomach is hurting you go to the doctor, right? Your chest is tight, you go and see if you need your inhaler. Same way, the emotional thing, that's an excellent point Chanel has made. The emotional side of it needs to be, because it is all connected. So we need to normalize that, going to talk to your doctor or your therapist or whatever is going on with you, with no shame, nothing to be afraid of, nothing to feel, embarrassed about. Just another checkup that you're getting done.
Right. And I think part of our institutions, we need to make that clear, right? We have to do better messaging around that. How do we as therapists be more visible in communities? And that's a lot of the work that I'm doing. How do we put ourselves out there so people can see us and talk to us and have conversations? So I love this forum that we can talk about it, because there are often not a lot of forums that address this topic specifically. And I'm glad to see you here, right? So you're showing up and learning. And there's no shame in that. There's nothing, coming to a mental health topic doesn't mean that you have mental health problems, right? And so the more that we can normalize these conversations with our friends and with our families at churches. I've been doing a lot of work with Black churches around the intersection of our faith and our mental health, and really working with churches and pastors not to, to how to talk to their congregation, how to integrate mental health as another resource. We have people that you got to pray about it, or if you have a mental health problem, that means you're not faithful enough, or you're not praying enough. So there are a lot of messages that really make it hard for people to reach out and get help. And so, but the more that we can have these conversations, you guys are seeing us, these two cool women who are psychologists and psychiatrists, right? You're like, I want to go see them. And we keep it real. I mean, I keep it real. I know you do too, Maisha. We keep it real in our sessions. I don't put on ears, right? We just talk. I hear about your life. We talk about what's going on with your family. We talk about what you want to work on today. We make a plan on things you can do over the next session. So, sometimes feels like talking to a friend, and, I tell people it's a wonderful space because the person is just focused on you and they don't have any agenda, right? They're not personally invested in like you being a certain way, right? Other than like healthy. And so it's really, I say try it, because it just, having someone who's just listening to you, they're not jumping in and adding their own 2 cents about what you should do, right? That's really focused on you, and they're understanding you and really trying to build you up. Like, that's what therapy is about.
Yeah. I'm always struck by people when they come to see me for the first time, they would bring somebody, just in case. Like, I don't know what this woman in there doing. She working some kind of funniness on me. And by the end of the session, they're like, okay, I could come back now on my own, because they say it's not any funny thing. We're not doing weirdness, and, we're just talking about what your experiences have been. And I think that really helps the process, right? Because then people get more comfortable and they don't feel that they have to hide or bring a friend or call a friend. Yeah.
I think that's great if people bring a friend. It's like, that's good, because now there's 2 people you get to impact, right? They're like, oh, she's pretty cool. But yeah, our goal is really about helping you, get healthy. And I know, Mike, you want to talk about the medication piece, because sometimes people often think, well, she's going to give me these medications, but
right.
I don't prescribe, but you're part of that conversation. Nobody's doing anything to you. You get to decide if Maisha may make recommendations, but at the end of the day, you decide if that's something you want to try or not. And so really,
that's a good point, because yes, I'm a doctor, but I don't prescribe unless I think it's absolutely necessary. Because a lot of times people come in thinking I'm going to give them something, that somehow I'm going to force them to take it, or I'll make you end up looking like a zombie. And, medications have their place, but it's not for every single person. So not everybody who comes into my office, I think, would need medication. Medication typically is for people who are having more severe type symptoms, because a lot of what can be done with talk therapy, right? But if medication is indicated, then I'm not going to say, well, don't take it, right? So I think you have to recognize that there are going to be times when things are to the point where it's probably better to combine both medication with talk therapy. Talk therapy will always be part of whatever management plan we come up with. It's the medication part that's not always going to be part of it, right? So pretty much, the meds we use in psychiatry are around managing, say, anxiety, depression, psychosis, that type, mood stabilizers, so there are lots of agents that we use. But at the end of the day, you ultimately, what I say to people when I see somebody in my office, I say, listen, I am going to tell you, based on what you tell me, what my recommendations are. Ultimately, you know your body better than I do. I will be out of place to tell you what you must do. I can't, right? So I give you, based on my experience and my training, what I think you can do. You now have to weigh it up, right? You have to look at all what I'm saying, all what you've read, because I always say to people, we've had this conversation. I will help direct you to particular websites that I think are good and say, go and read it up. And we can come back next week and continue this conversation. So there's no pressure. There's no, well, you have to do this because I tell you that this is what you need. I mean, I find that approach quite unhelpful. If somebody did that to me, I would just walk out and I won't come back because, who are you talking to, right? I have a brain. I can think about what I want for my own self. And so I find that approach is much more helpful than kind of prescribing, right, you have to do these 10 things and then you'll be fine. I don't think that is very helpful. So it's about, let us work through what works best or what you think will work best for you. And so medication may be part of that or it may not. But that definitely is a conversation that we have multiple times before. I've seen people where we've had a management plan in place, and after a year, the person is saying, okay, I'm feeling better, but it's not back to my baseline. So I think now I will try what other things you were suggesting, right? But it's not you're not doing what I say, so I'm done with that. I mean, that obviously is not a very helpful approach. Someone is asking if you guys specialize in couples therapy as well. So yeah, so you can do individual therapy. I do couples as well. Some therapists will do families. I tend not to do family therapy just because I think you need a different type of specialist, somebody with special expertise in that area, because when you have adults with kids and that interaction, I think a family therapist is probably the better person. But yes, I do that. Charmaine, do you do couples?
I do, yeah, I do some couples, and I'm doing less and less therapy over time, but I definitely do some couples therapy and family therapy as well. And so, yeah, there's lots of different modalities that are out there. And it's really important to also interview your therapist before you go in and meet with them. Most people will, have a brief conversation so you can get to know them a little bit or ask questions. And I'm all about, like, you as a client, you're a consumer, the same way that you would, do your research before you make a major purchase. So do your research when you get a therapist. You don't have to connect, feel stuck with the first person that you meet. I really encourage you to kind of, go date a couple of them before you select your final one, and part of that is like, we are all different. We have different training and different expertise. And sometimes we will go to the one person and it doesn't work and they feel, oh, therapy doesn't work, right? And so it just means that that relationship didn't work because it's very personal. And so it's really important to, interview, check out, ask questions, have they worked with people with your particular concerns before? So it's good to educate yourself and make sure that you're connecting with someone who you're going to feel comfortable with. I have clients who interviewed me. One woman, I just kind of crack up. She was like, she made a joke and I started laughing. She's like, oh, good, you have a sense of humor. You're gonna be my therapist. So sometimes it can be very simple, but, it's a way of, me showing my humanity and, she felt comfortable with that. So ask questions before you decide on who you wanna, settle with for the therapist. There's a question here. How do you cope when a close friend dies by suicide? And so it's like grief and loss. So like if someone has died, but I think it becomes more pronounced because sometimes you don't know why the person died and you can be left feeling like, I did not see this coming. So people often feel really shocked. People sometimes feel very angry at the person who's died. They may feel betrayed. Then there may be this guilt that comes like, oh, I didn't know enough, or they called me and I didn't call back. And so that's why. And so there's a lot of rumination and worry and guilt that can come with a colleague or a friend or a family member who dies by suicide. And so, I think part of it is just allowing yourself to experience all the different emotions that you're having. And to see it as it's, we call it like complicated grief, right? There's grief, but with like this extra stuff added on top of it. So giving yourself time, but knowing that the person in that moment felt that that was the only option, and not to, understand that it's part of a mental health condition that may not have been diagnosed or recognized, and people feeling lost and hopeless in the pain and the emotional pain that they were experiencing. So I think being able to locate it in that, and giving yourself grace and compassion and patience with the process, just like grief, like there's, like when someone dies from a physical illness, like just allow yourself to kind of cope with that. And there's no one can tell you, okay, you need to be done with it, right? So allowing yourself to grieve in the way that you feel works for you, knowing that there'll be days that might feel better and days that might get worse. Finding ways to connect with positive memories about the person, or connecting with people who knew them, can be helpful. I think when you try to focus on the like, why did they do it? Or that can often not lead you to anywhere because it's usually a question that's not answered. Yeah. I don't know if anything else you want to add, Maisha.
And just to make the point that, as part of the person left behind, the whole concept of grief and the fact that it comes and goes with a whole set of emotions all mixed up, right? And just to recognize that, you may be angry today, guilty tomorrow, tearful, an hour later, and all of that is all normal. Like feeling quite confused and mixed up, and all those emotions one at a time or two or all together, that's quite normal. And all part of, what is the grieving process. And it takes time with no kind of end point. So you can decide, well, it's, a year now and therefore it's enough of that grieving, time to move on. It doesn't quite work like that, especially as David was saying, it's a close friend. So, the impact on you probably will last a long time. Not that you won't be able to move on and kind of process the grief, but just to make the point that, it's normal to have all those different emotions all together, or one at a time. There's no order, there's no specific time frame. And And so you got to expect that all of that is a normal thing. And just to underscore what Charmaine was saying about asking the question, well, why? I think that becomes, it's not helpful for you because you are trying to kind of put a logical explanation to something that does not have a logical explanation. By the time someone gets to that point where they see that suicide as the only option, it's well, you know, I'm such a this type of person who has caused this, or I'm creating that, and this will never get better, I can't get out of that, then, you know, the decision then becomes not the kind of logical thinking that you are expecting or thinking. So asking repeatedly, well, why did she do that? Or, you know, it really doesn't help you kind of work through the whole process, you know.
We have a comment from Harold and question. Living in New York where COVID was bad, I now see many friends, mostly women, refusing to go out and are very paranoid about COVID. We also lost 14 friends in April. What are the signs of mental health decay?
Right. So as we were talking before, you know, going into grief is one thing, but then depending on, you know, how various symptoms on how long they've been going on and the effect on your function, you look at, you know, not just feeling low or irritable, but other things start to get affected as well. And I think, Charmaine, you kind of spoke to some of that in your slide when you were talking about sleep disturbances and appetite disturbances, not being able to concentrate, feeling unusually tired all the time, not having any interest in things you normally would like to do. You know, people noticing that you're either slowed down and not moving and talking in the way that you used to, or the opposite to that, which is, you know, you're agitated and irritable. Little things kind of have you on edge. A lot of guilt, a lot of feeling helpless, you know, things will never get better. What's the point of all of this? Like this kind of hopeless feelings. And then yourself then developing thoughts of death and wishing, you know, I wish I could just fall asleep. Somebody told me today, you know, I wish I could just fall asleep and not wake up, which is what we call kind of a death wish, all the way to the other end where you are making active plans of hurting yourself, right? So the point here is that when you get into the realm of depression, it's not just saying, I feel down today because, you know, I got into an argument with somebody. It's all those other things in addition to your mood being down. And all of these things then affect your ability to function. So again, going back to the whole thing about a change, like how we were saying, how with children, you look for a change in their behavior. Similarly with adults, you have all these symptoms and it's affecting the way you are functioning. You can't get out of bed. I have patients who tell me, you know, I can't, some mornings I get up, I wake up, but I cannot physically get out of bed. Or I get out of bed and to get into the shower takes me like a good hour because I have to think about it. I'm tired, I just can't move, or, you know, I do that and then I can't get out of the house. So you can imagine then your function is really impaired, right? So it's about how all of these symptoms are then affecting your ability to be productive and function in your usual way.
Yeah, and I would add on to that. Thanks, Maisha, for that. Kind of going back to David's comment about coping as well with a friend's suicide, is that I think that's an optimal time. And this example, losing 14 friends in a month, that's a lot. And like, sometimes we kind of try to power through things and kind of shake them off and act like they're not bothering us. But if we were to stay, and I'm doing this because I'm always busy, right? I can like fill my every minute up with something. But if we take a moment and stop and reflect and kind of really allow ourselves to experience what's losing 14 friends or losing one friend is huge. And so we need to like recognize that and name that's a big change in your life. And that's an optimal time to go talk to a therapist. Like, why not, right? So these are not usual things that happen in our day-to-day life. These are crises. And sometimes often crises require a different response. You can't keep doing the same thing. And so I would definitely advocate for go talk to a therapist. You may just need to see 2 or 3 sessions and help process the grief and loss that you're experiencing, rather than holding on to it and letting it kind of burden you or in a way that you can't move past. Now, I don't want to say move past, right? But that you can't deal or function. That's what we're here for. We're here for those moments as well. So use us, please. I also shared in the chat a suicide training that I did with an organization called Samaritan's Hope that's based in Massachusetts. So I co-facilitated a workshop, and so it's available on YouTube. Really, really great, really comprehensive. And I think if you've had anyone who's died by suicide, it's really important to understand for yourself, and even if you haven't had, I think, again, in this time, is seen as education, and using, finding ways to just educate about mental health. So.
Any final comments from either of the panelists?
I think my main thing would be, just along the vein of what we're talking about in terms of being open and ready and willing to see someone if you're thinking that you're really struggling. Well, even before you get to really struggling, just, again, I think if you remember nothing else what I said, the whole concept around the normalization of mental health, seeing a therapist or a psychiatrist and making it part of your yearly routine, much as you do, a physical health checkup. I think that would be the main thing I would like to leave with the audience tonight.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. I think we didn't get to talk about mental health in schools, and that's a lot of my role. And so I would just say advocate for mental health conversations in every space that you're in. Again, help normalize the conversation. But someone said it earlier, but this is about taking care of yourself in a way that you're really tapping into, like, how am I doing? Wake up every morning, how am I doing? What do I need to feel good? What do I need to feel well? And using different strategies to help bring, one of the things I love to teach people is something called a gratitude list. So starting and ending your day with 2 to 3 things that you're grateful for. It's a great way to kind of shift from a negative focus to a positive. But really, this is about understanding that we all have mental health, right? It depends on which part of the continuum we fall. And so we take care of ourselves, we take care of those around us. It's like that, put your mask on first. So I just encourage everyone to notice that emotional wellness is for everyone.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of our session. I want to express thanks to you, Dr. Emmanuel and Dr. Jackman, for taking the time out to share so willingly and openly with us. I also wish to thank all of those participants who have been with us through Zoom and also watching by YouTube. And we look forward to perhaps inviting you again to have a similar session to continue as it relates to schools and what is happening within the school environment. Now that, there's so much pressure on children having to go to school alternate days, etc. So again, on behalf of the executive and all those here tonight, thanks to you for your contributions to us. And we look forward to having those of you who are available tomorrow at our financial planning session. And we invite you to also participate in that session so that you can get some tips relating to financial planning.
Before everyone drops off as well, we have David on the line, and David just wanted to just speak a little bit on one of the projects that we're doing. So I'd just like to give David a minute to say that, and then we can have any other final wrap-up thoughts after that.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel and Dr. Jackman, for your very interesting presentation. And thanks to you, Mark, and your team for powering through against all adversity and hosting a Combamere Week, a virtual Combamere Week, which is brand new and innovative. And kudos to you and the team for this. Also, thanks for encouraging me to attend the church service yesterday, which was most enthralling. And it's nothing like Commonwealthans getting together despite the COVID protocols and listening to the rich tenor line headed by our own Gay Griffith. I never knew Gay was such a good singer. So anyway, moving right along. I want to talk a little bit about the project that we've got and the group that's shared by Mark and Professor Dungs. And through the board of management, a number of items that they will call us and assist school with. And because of the COVID protocols, one of the mechanisms for mitigating these eventualities is that in order to get students in the face of a school to sort of stay separate, which is a toll itself. One of the things that we focus on is the groups that they congregate in, particularly the eating and study groups. And one of the things that has been identified to us is the need for park benches. The board, along with the principal, have okayed this project. And there's a need for 15 of these. I costed these $600 each, which totals just under $10,000. However, if we get the response, which I'm sure we can get, that by sheer economies of scale, we probably could be able to get about 18 of these and divide the project up among the sets. There are 6 sets at Commonwealth School. It's at A, B, C, D, E, and F. And if we can get each set responsible for the construction of 3 of these, we'll get 18 of them. And the project is going to be spearheaded through our industrial arts wing, headed by Mr. Ivor Boyce, who is very, very keen on the project. In fact, Mr. Boyce has already identified his senior students who are his charges for a higher level of industrial arts, that he's going to set about getting them to do a design which they will vet and actually approve of. And then we are going to have a spirited competition amongst the sets so that they will construct them under the guidance of Mr. Boyce and those persons that senior students that he would have identified to supervise the construction of them. The actual, it's a little more complex than that because it's a question of getting enough students involved in industrial arts per set, which he himself doesn't know how many people are involved, but we'll get around that with assigning senior students to supervise the construction. We believe that this is we know it's going to be a very exciting project, and the spirit of competition would mean that the sets will be responsible for maintaining these things throughout the course throughout the lifespan of the actual project. Now, we've got buy-in from the board of management and from the principal, and we hope to set about doing this thing immediately. We have got 3 commitments for funding from 3 individuals so far, and I know that this is a very, very attainable goal. Mark will let us know how we can make the contributions, but we'll go about getting the items that we need and start this project during Commonwealth Week. I think it's a fitting time to do so. Mr. Boyce Ivor Boyce is very excited about the whole project, and I think it will augur well for camaraderie, it's relationship building, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I want each and every one of us who's online and listening to feel free to contribute and speak to Mark about where you can make your contribution and get this project on the road. Thanks again, Mark, and up and on, and hope for a very successful virtual Commonwealth Week. Thanks again.
Thanks, David. So anyone that's interested in donating to this particular venture, you can just log on to the website CSOSAbarbados.com, and in the store or under the news section, there are a number of the projects that we are working on. The Benches project is one of them, and that's the one that David was just speaking about. We're also asking folks to donate towards Commonwealth Week, because as you usually know, we would normally have a grand reunion on Friday, and that's how we usually get the funds to put on a week every year. Unfortunately, we're not going to have that this year due to COVID, but we still have a number of expenses in in doing a lot of the things that we are doing over the week. So we are asking people to donate to Common Week if you can. And the site itself is just a source of information for all Common-Marians, and we're trying to build it and we're trying to bring all the different groups together. So please log on at some point, register as part of the alumni, and that allows us to connect with you a lot easier. Okay. Andrew, anything else on your end?
No, I think.
Okay, well, there's nothing else unless thanks for joining everyone. It was great having you. And hopefully we'll see you guys tomorrow at our financial planning seminar, which is at 7 p.m. tomorrow, same channel.
Up and on.
Up and on, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
It's my first Common Week since I left, so I'm excited to finally get to participate.
Fantastic.
Good day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.